welcome back to the channel, guys, and welcome to another video. So as you can see, I've just finished a very difficult Thursday. In fact, every day this week has been absolutely manic. We've got work coming in left, right and centre, and as you can see by my eyes, I'm a little bit tired. So I had to tell you about this story. As you can see, I've just got home. Sometimes I like to just sit down in the comfort of my own home and tell you these little stories. For all you critics out there that don't see the point in my little vlogs, especially sitting at home, then please look away now. If we just run back to before Christmas, you may be able to tell by the thumbnail what this is about. So we had a guy come in with a Lister 3-cylinder generator engine. Tried for the warranty claim. Turns out we didn't even build the engine in the first place. We then built the engine with a new crankshaft. It had done a big end. Wrong crankshaft he supplied, so we then had to strip it, build it with the correct crankshaft, and away he goes. Heard nothing more. Monday, I come back after break and the Lister was sitting on the floor with the generator and all the gubbins bolted on the back end of it. So the customer had obviously been speaking to John, my business partner. I said, what's going on here? What's the engine back for? He said, he's got an issue with oil pressure. Now, I didn't put the sump on, and therefore I didn't really know what the oil pump setup was on it. So I had a chat with John and Carlos, and because they put it together. Basically, the guys turned around and said, yeah, can't get any oil pressure at all. There's no oil pressure at all. So he's basically dumped it on our doorstep for us to have a look. Now, fortunately, as I say, the generator's on the back of the engine. I'll just show you a picture of it here, although it is in the thumbnail. So fortunately, we can get the sump off without taking any of the other bits off. Although it's very heavy, we sort of put it on a trolley, suspended by the crane, etc., and we can pull the sump down and have a look. Now, apparently what he said was, back in the day, he did do one of these himself in the very early days, and he said the oil pump, which is this type, funny design, there's a hole in the bottom of the block which goes up into the oil way. The very top of it goes up to the camshaft, which has a lobe which drives the pump. Now, this type of pump is a little bit like a bicycle pump. Pumps one way and then sucks the oil through the oil strainer in the sump, up through the pump, and then when it goes back the other way, it pumps it into the main gallery. So the cam is driving the top of it and pumping the oil, basically. So it's got a 2-ball valve in there. One ball sits in the bottom, one sits in the top. Now, what he said was, in the early days, when he's gone to put the sump on from underneath, if you're not careful, the bottom of the pump can fall off and one of the balls could fall into the sump, and you sort of put it back up and not know that the balls fell out, is what he was saying. So that was what we was half expecting to see. Although John was fairly certain, he was very careful and, you know, followed the manual, and everything was fine. Anyway, took the sump down. Although the pump did come down with the sump, I suppose unless you take it off sideways, the pump it will come down with the sump, or the bottom half of it. So the pump did come out with the sump, although it did all stay intact. So everything was fine there. I had a good look, although it wasn't good news because there was metal in the oil in the base of the sump. So we've drained the oil out. And this is a picture of the oil. You can see looks fairly sort of metallic-y. So we looked up the base of the block. The mains all looked chewed up. It looked like it had been ran. What you're meant to do with an engine that's been freshly built and completely dry is you fill it full of oil, then you crank it over or turn it over until the oil pressure gets up with either a gauge on it or something. You know, in most cars have only got a light, so until the light goes out. But this thing looked like it had been run because obviously it's chewed the main bearings up. And the debris that was in the oil was white metal. Next thing we did was take the oil filter off, which first of all looked at the numbers, etc. It's the right oil filter. It's a spin-on type, so it's like a modern car filter that just spins on the side of the block. Took that off, bone dry. It hadn't been primed and it looked like the engine had been run. Being a generator, this isn't like a car. You're going to fire this thing up. It's going to pick up the revs straight away to probably 2,500 revs. It's not just going to idle. Unless the oil pressure's up, it's not going to take long to run those bearings dry. So I come to the conclusion that he'd fired the thing up. I phoned him up. I said, look, you've got bad news. It looks like you haven't primed the filter. And I said, have you run this engine? He said, no, I didn't run it, just turned it over. I said, well, that's odd because it's chewed the main bearings up. Right, he says. And I said, yeah, it looks like you haven't primed the filter at all because it's dry. Never had to prime the filter in my life, done loads of them. I said, well, there's various engines that we do, Cosworth's being one of them, that unless you prime that filter, you're going to be very lucky that oil pressure builds up straight away. I mean, we've had it in the Cosworths where we've even primed the filter, and because you put it on sideways, some of the oil comes out, although it is primed, but unless you backfill it, that pump does not pick up the oil. So as I say, we've had to backfill it through the pressure switch until it picks up the oil. So the chances are, if you've just stuck it on bone dry and fired the engine up, although you say you haven't, well, he says, no, it's got to be something else in the engine. I said, well, the best thing for you to do is come in and see us. So he's turned up. Fortunately, I'd popped out. When I got back, I said to John, what was the outcome? He said he did admit that he'd fired it up. And when it started, he persisted in taking the oil pressure switch out of the block to see if the oil was coming through, to see if there was any oil pressure. By then, it sort of died. It just gradually died and almost stopped, so he turned it off. There's your damage. I think what he'd sort of discussed with John is that he's going to take it away, take off the generator and what have you off the back of the engine, and maybe take the rocker covers off and all the cylinder heads and then bring it back. And I said, well, does he expect us to do this under warranty? Does he still think it's our fault? He said, well, I don't really know. By the sort of sound of him, he maybe does. And I said, well, the trouble is, it just seems to me the last 5 years since we've owned the business, he almost expects everyone to help him out if there's a problem. But really, we're a business, like we're so busy. I don't see, if the shoe was on the other foot and I was in that situation, I wouldn't expect anyone else to help me out financially if something had happened that I had done. It's just, maybe I've got a different mentality, but I just wouldn't expect that of anyone. I said to John, I said, look, the best thing to do in this situation these days is put everything in writing. So I'll send him an email of basically an estimate and a report on the estimate saying what we've done, what we've found. We don't think it's our fault. If there's any disagreement in that between us, best thing to do, get a separate engineer to come in and do, make their own mind up, do the report. And also I put on there what I estimate the price would be to repair that engine. I also put on the bottom there, because bear in mind, because he's an old customer, he was on an account. So the engine hasn't even been paid for yet originally. When he came in and I spoke to him, when he picked it up, I didn't charge him for stripping it and building it again when he supplied the wrong crank. I charged him £1,500 to build the engine, which I guess in a way was sort of helping him out. But he was still disappointed with that. I don't quite know how much he thought I was going to charge him. But there was a lot of hours went into it, and obviously various parts, so I was a bit surprised by that. On the bottom of there, I said, look, before any of this is done or discussed, we do need the first bill to be paid for the first engine. He's come in today. Again, I was out on a delivery, come back, and he'd been in, he'd paid the bill, but he was not happy with me, John said, not happy one bit that he received that email. I don't quite know what he wanted me to do, really, as I say. I don't know whether it was the fact that I sent the email or the fact that it had on there the potential cost of repairing this engine, which I don't think was our fault whatsoever. So to me, I mean, you guys can comment underneath. You may see this differently, but to me, I just think he's been unreasonable. And I said to John, he would have no problems whatsoever if we didn't charge him a penny for anything. You know, I don't see him turning around and saying, no guys, look, it's not your fault. You've got to make a living, you know, you've got a business to run. And so, you know, I don't expect any favours. But no, he's quite happy to let us foot all the bill and get to the ump whenever I send him an estimate, let alone a bill. So basically, guys, he's come back this afternoon. He's picked the engine up, he's paid for the original bill, and he's took it away. And apparently, John said he's not too worried about it now. He's just going to go and buy a whole new generator under warranty for his customer. But when he came in to pick it up, he didn't even look at me, let alone speak to me. So I fear that we may have lost him. But I'd love you to comment, guys, see what you think, whether you think that I'm being unreasonable or what. But I don't think I am. Well, there we go, guys. Thanks very much for watching. Remember to subscribe, like, and definitely comment down below what you think about that. I'd be really interested to know. And until the next vid, I'll see you soon. Take care. Cheers, guys.